If you guys wouldn't mind by starting off introducing yourselves, start with Dan, I guess. So.
Oh, cool. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're great.
Cool. I'm Dan Nokes. I'm a writer artist with a little one-man outfit called 21st Century Sandshark Studios. Like I said, I write, I draw, and self-publish my own comics.
Cool. Sorry, you wanna go?
I'll introduce myself. I'm Tara Moeller. I'm a writer and editor with Dreampunk Press, which is a collective of authors that self-publish together. I'm also a prior student of Tease, and I am a wannabe comic writer. And I have several comic scripts in the works, none of which I'm happy with.
And let's see. Looks like T's internet cut out, so he's temporarily not here. Let's see. I guess while we're waiting for him to reconnect, would you guys mind answering the next question? What got you guys into writing? So.
Would you like me to start, or?
Sure, yeah.
Sure. I mean, I guess specifically with I guess in the writing in general, I always had, I guess, stories in my head as a kid, and I lent towards comics because I also had artistic ability. So it's always my artistic endeavors were always towards story creation. So I guess that's where the two kind of married up.
Yeah, I have absolutely no artistic ability in drawing. So yeah, I think for most writers, it starts when you're a kid. You write. You write little short stories. You have stories in your head that you want to put on paper, and eventually you get brave enough to put it out there for other folks to read. So.
And so what do you guys do to stay focused on your writing, or do you have any time management methods that you use?
Time management, what's that? Tell me more of this human concept.
I would tell you more if I knew more. It's an elusive thing that I've heard of in fable tales.
Sounds like gobbledygook to me.
Usually it's whatever time you have, you write. So especially when you have another full-time job that takes up a big chunk of time, you write when you make time to write as you can.
It's definitely setting and making the time. I mean, it takes an enormous amount of self-discipline, which is not a known quality among the creative community.
Hey, welcome back. He's connecting.
Hello.
Hey, so real quick, do you mind introducing yourself?
Certainly. My name's T. Campbell. I've been writing comics online for about 20 years, and lots of other stuff, but that's that's most relevant probably.
Cool. I had just asked Tara and Dan, is there what do you do to stay focused on your writing? Is there any methods you use to do that?
Well, it's not a you make it a you make it a fairly central part of your life, so that the other stuff is just noise as much as you can. You try to you try to make a quiet time of the day. You cut away everything else. I mean, some people can write with music. I can't write with music. If there's a TV going in the background or something like that, then that means my wife is watching it. I'm not really watching it. Yeah, that's probably enough.
So I was gonna, my next question I was gonna ask, is there any, sorry, I lost my place. Was there any advantages or disadvantages you guys have found with self-publishing your work?
Well, in my case, self-publishing meant that I was able to do it, which is a pretty big advantage. I mean, working in comics, in some ways this has changed, and in some ways it really hasn't. If you don't have something very specific that the big guys are looking for, then it's down to you to make the case for your existence, and that that wasn't going to happen with the ideas I was spitting out. I mean, I would have been happy to do Justice League, but there's a long line to get to Justice League, and having been tapped for one Avengers story in the course of my entire 20-year career, I don't feel like that's a really viable solution. It keeps changing. That's one of the disadvantages. You can't really set up a system to publish yourself and say, okay, this is how I'm going to handle the next 30 years of my career, because 10 years ago, Facebook was just barely a thing, and 20 years ago, the internet was just barely a thing. We're talking right now about whether it's going to be more valuable for me to start a YouTube channel or a Twitch stream, and that wasn't a question 5 years ago. So you've got to keeping up with what is actually viable for a new project that you're starting now is its own full-time job, along with the 10 or 12 other full-time jobs that self-publishing offers you.
Dan, do you have any?
What's the biggest advantage and disadvantages of being going into self-publishing?
Yeah.
Well, I like to start off with a little bit of paraphrasing. It's like the greatest, the best thing about self-publishing is anybody can do it. The worst thing about self-publishing is anybody can do it. Again, I think my favorite thing about doing it is putting out the kind of stories that I want to put out, and I've been a big champion of the adage for a long time that comics are a medium and not a genre. I mean, it's a lot of the dialogue is basically around. Well, I say it like this: people think comics can be about this, but people tend to focus on this and pretend that it's this. They focus on the same one genre in two companies, and think that that's the entire potential of storytelling within the comics medium. And
Let's see, what superhero story is also? Yeah, I know where you're going. Sorry, I mean, just trying to back you up.
But yeah, no, definitely. I look at I look at, I wanted to do my own little small part of expanding people's conception of what comics can do. I mean, even if it inspires like, 4 or 5 people to go out and do whatever they want to do within comics, that I don't want them to feel bound to like, well, here's a good example. A lot of times I sit up at a show and people come up and ask me to hear their pitch about their comic. And I would say 75 to 90% of the time, the pitch always opens up, all right, it's about this superhero who, it's like, well, my response is, did you want to create did you create a superhero character because you wanted to do that, or do you felt that that's what you were supposed to do because that was the trappings and the only thing that the comics are supposed to be telling stories about? And I kind of want to be able to, at least expand people's horizons on comics in my own small little way. I guess the downside of self-publishing is, there's probably the same thing for a lot of people that go into this endeavor, is the business side of it. Like I have to be a businessman. I have to be a business person, whether I want to or not. I have to think from that angle, as opposed to like somebody as a bit more who does work for hire, or has, I guess, their own quote unquote literary agent, or goes through a major publishing house to get their product out there.
Yeah, for self-publishing in general, whether it's a novel or a comic, when you self-publish, you have control over the entire project, which can be great. That means you get to decide on your cover art. You're deciding who does your interior work with you. If you're the writer, if you're an artist, you find somebody who can help you write. All of that's in your control, which kind of fun, and it's great. You can get it, you can aim for the product you want, but you're also responsible for all of that, which means you've got to find, if you're the comic author, you have to find the artist, and you have to pay the artist, or come up with an agreement where that you're both to and amenable to. You're responsible for the cover, you're responsible for marketing, you're responsible for production, you're responsible for all of it. And that can be very, very overwhelming. And I know, 10 years ago when I published, self-published my first novel, it was kind of easy. I knew what a novel was. I knew what it was. I wasn't a big comic book reader because I really loved superheroes. And I wanted girls in comics, which you get more now. I love some stuff. I love going into local heroes here in Norfolk, and they find me stuff that I like. So when I first, took the class from T about, writing scripts for comics, I figured it'd be the same, kind of the same deal. And no, it's not. There's similarities and there's differences, because there's a whole lot more art involved in comic. There's a whole lot more time that an artist is going to invest in than possibly even the author. And so you kind of almost have to, you either have to know both sides, or you have to already have an artist that's a friend of yours that you're willing to work with and risk that friendship over a product that you want to put out.
Mm-hmm. How would you say the self-publishing for comics and for novels has changed over the years? Like, T briefly mentioned like a lot of the internet it's changed, but is there anything specific about the industry that you guys have noticed that changed?
I mean, I came in around 2002 when there was an internet, but there was definitely not really a widespread social media presence. Like eventually, like it was Friendster and MySpace, and then it went on to Facebook, Twitter, and the 3,000 other networks that they have now.
We had forums.
Yeah, forums are the big, yeah. A large venue for self-promotion is there now that was not there when I started 18 years ago.
Social media has definitely changed a lot in terms of how comics are approached online, which is where I've done most of my work. It's also brought some aspects of the experience back out of our control, which has been challenging to deal with, to be blunt. When you were doing a comic on the internet in 2000 or 2001, people were going to come to your site with your URL with your .com behind it. There were occasionally you might see a collective of cartoonists that were comicname.comiccollective.com, but we weren't just part of the Facebook feed. There were aspects of the social environment and the experience that were under our control, and as a result, we could tell longer, more involved stories without worrying so much that somebody would just be coming in to get a little piece of it and then go away. The shift toward social media has accompanied a shift toward quicker, easier, more gettable content, which is nice for the more gifted comedians among us, but that's been one of the aspects of the whole field changing that I wasn't entirely prepared for when I got started. Who knows what it'll be like in 2030 though? We might see a shift in another direction.
I think there's a lot more support now than there maybe was 10 or 15 years ago. Whatever type of self-publishing you're doing, whether talking novels or comics. I know I've published or have Lulu do some of my print on demand. And they now have a comic that they can print on demand. So if you are self-publishing a comic, and that's new, relatively new for them, they have now offer full interior, like for and they even mentioned, hey, if you do a graphic novel, hey, we have POD for that now, print on demand. Again, relatively new for Lulu. And Amazon has it now for ebook comics, which again, not absolutely new, still relatively new, where those didn't exist before. So you were going to like Blam or something like that. And again, but it wasn't really POD, small print runs that you were doing. And it's a little bit more where you have more places where you can kind of cost out. Do you want to do POD? Do you want to do a small print run? There are more and more smaller comic book publishers. Like I have a friend who's at Conquest Comics, and they help new people all the time. In fact, John is kind of helping me try to write the comic I'm trying to write now so that I'm happier with it. So I'm not at the end going, it sucks. I.e. the development part of it for me. So there's a better support group for folks getting into it for the first time, for folks who've been doing it for a while that kind of understand how things work, so they can say, do I want to do POD? Do I want to do a small print run? Hey, I do a small print run first, and then I go to POD, just to keep it out there, which is something that wasn't everywhere before. So there's more support, I think, for the small independent self-publishing folks now that wasn't there necessarily 10 years ago.
I think there's another thing too that came up around about 10, 12 years ago, and that's the advent of crowdfunding.
Yeah.
Before it was always you, like especially like you were either trying to get like a small loan from a friend or save money to put away to get a print run down, and now you have this. You have stuff like, I guess, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and a few others where you can just go online, find investors that will back you anywhere from like $1 to whatever upper limit you will, and you provide the product, you put it out there, and that has definitely been able to change the dynamic of how you get your comic to market.
Where do you see most of your business come from? You mentioned doing like a small print run or print on demand. There's also like ebooks and web-based comics and stuff. Where do you see most of your business come from, or what would you see is the better route to go when publishing?
What's income?
Yeah.
Again, it's another thing that
First of all, Corey, I have to warn you. Han Solo is taking aim right behind you, and it's really making me nervous that you're not going to survive the session.
Well, I got Han and the Dalek, so like I'm curious to see who's gonna come out.
Also, I would this might be answering your question with a question a little bit, but I would say that you really don't know when you're starting a new project where the revenue is necessarily going to come from. You don't. Some projects are very well adapted to crowdfunding. Some of them are very well adapted to on-site advertising. Some of them are very merchandisable, and some of them are not. The last major project that I was a part of, we tried everything, and we had some successes. But there were a whole lot of our contemporaries, people we knew and trusted and had goals somewhat similar to our own, who were cleaning up in the T-shirt market, and we tried one, and it laid such a stinky bomb that we never spoke of it again. The nice thing about the current chaotic marketplace is that it's not really that big of a jump to try something new. If you want to be selling a particular proprietary kind of ebook that's sponsored by Verizon, which is what I ended up doing for a while in 2009, all you have to do is reformat your stuff, and boom, you're good to go. It's not at all like it was 30 years ago, or 50 years ago, where the prospect of moving from publishing a book to printing a T-shirt had so many barriers to entry that nobody would even consider it. That said, we tend to see most of our revenue at this point from digital advertising, Patreon, and sometimes print editions of the stuff that we've already put online. But the last one, they have to be special. They have to be something. They have to be a sort of edition that justifies paying for something you've mostly already seen.
I guess for me, up until recently, I was getting a large chunk of my money from selling stuff at cons and shows, but definitely recent events have put the kibosh on that. So I mean, it was my mission in the last couple of years to lower the amount of shows that I was going to and have more passive
Mission
income.
accomplished.
But yeah, I wasn't anticipating being kicked into the fray quite so quickly and with as great a force. So now, I mean, I have the advantage of also being an artist, so I have supplemented that by trying to take as many like mail out commissions, try to do book sales and various I guess sort of like marketing publicity stunts to get I guess attention and revenue coming in my way. Trying to take advantage of the internet and social media as much as possible, and that of not having as many shows to go to and so from there.
Yeah, I have a day job. And I'm on this long haul plan, I guess. Social media is not my forte. I am learning it now, especially with the pandemic. Most of the sales that I've done, I do well at conventions because I can talk about my writing. I can talk about what motivated me to write a particular novel. And when I'm talking to one person that's at my table, someone will overhear and kind of step over because they'll hear something interesting, and I'll end up with in a conversation, and then which will end with a couple of book sales. And so I would usually break even, you know, for what my outlay to go to conventions. And yeah, haven't made a lot of money yet. Broke even. I have, you know, I write for a very, very small niche of readers, which doesn't really bother me yet because I'm kind of finding my audience still. And with Dreampunk Press, there's, as a collective, there's other authors involved. And so we're kind of trying to split some of the costs of the website, etc. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I find, you know, marketing and selling is the hardest part. Most creatives are not natural sellers until you're talking to somebody who's already interested in what you're selling or you're creative or what you've made. And for anything, comic or novel or whatever, you got to have a good cover. You got to have a cover that someone's going to walk over and say, what is that?
Mm-hmm.
And which is part of your marketing. It's always easy to do.
Yeah. I'm just gonna come right out and say it. I have a love-hate, mostly hate relationship with social media. And I think this goes back a little bit to what you were saying. Sorry, I can't point on here, but what was said earlier about the superhero genre and how everybody tries to just squash their creative self into a superhero suit before they even get started. I think that your approach to marketing yourself, like everything else, should be determined more by the kind of person you are and the kind of material you want to produce. And small can be good. Small is loyal. Up to a point. If three people are your entire audience, then congratulations, you're a hobbyist. But if you have a smaller, cozier audience, you can turn that to your advantage. One thing people don't generally realize when they look at Marvel is that for a significant period of its early history, it was the underdog. It was not selling nearly as well as Superman and Batman. Certainly not when Stan Lee started to turn things around in the 60s. But he was savvy enough to realize that he could make that a marketing hook by making those readers he did have feel like they were in on a secret the rest of the industry didn't know. And you know, the plan only worked for a while, but then they were the #1 comic book company, so they found other ways to survive. But anyway, I could go on with a couple other examples, but I think you get the point, and I don't want to hold things up too much.
My next question I was going to ask was, is there anything that you wish you had known about writing or self-publishing when you had started?
God, so much, so much. Where do I even begin? The #1 thing that I wish I could go back and tell myself is that people will pigeonhole you. They only have so much bandwidth in their lives, and they're not going to spend too much of it just describing you as a science fiction / teen dramedy / crossword designing / guy. They're going to say, oh yeah, I know him from that one thing, and that's going to be it. If you're a very if this makes you uncomfortable, if you're a very creative person who's got a million different ideas, then that needs to be how you portray yourself from the beginning. And you know, people change, and people's interests shift, and and to some degree that's something we have to cope with as creative people. But yeah, find a lot of time to decide what you want your brand to be, because if you don't pick one, they'll pick one for you.
I don't like. I think basically the best way I can answer that question is sort of when a comment. I'm doing another common con analogy I give to people, or a con story. A lot of people walk up to me who are looking to break into the business, and they ask me for like what I think is the best advice for getting in. And I always reply back, well, it depends on the age. If it's like under the age of 14, 15, I give them, like just keep working at what you're doing and continue writing stories and work on your art. But if you start to get into that adult age, like you're considering going to college and starting a career and all that, this is what I usually tell them. If you can figure out something else to do with your life that will be both fiscally satisfying and will give you a sense of fulfillment creatively, go do that. If you can't, welcome to the world of comics, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Yes. What are you doing, you mad fool?
Yeah. But yeah, that's probably the story I tell myself. But
one of the things I wish I had known is that you never know it all. I've been doing this 10 years, and things change so much. You've got to constantly keep up and make sure that you know what everyone's doing in order to keep up, in order to maintain standards. You never ever can comfortably say, I know exactly what I'm doing and that I'm doing that I'm doing it right.
Well, that's a relief.
And I know both T and Tara, you guys do. You're both also editors as well. I was going to ask, do Do you find editing more difficult or less difficult than writing?
When I started, I found it more difficult. I think that over time it's gotten easier, because I've gotten meaner. There's I mean, I used to just agonize over the thought that some unkind word from me might crush the delicate flower of somebody's creative spirit. Whether or not they were my friend, you know, if they're your friend, then that's a whole other complication. But I I remember I gave somebody some very gentle criticism, or at least I thought it was gentle criticism, when I was in college and talking with somebody else who I thought had, like me, plans to spend their life doing comics, and well, I could see that he was really shaken up by it, and I basically never heard from him again, even though we were doing all kinds of comics projects in college. So that kind of thing, that'll stick with you for a while. But at this point, you know, I just don't have the patience to worry about that sort of thing. which, like I said, sounds really bad, and but there it is. In terms of doing the actual work, editing is generally easier because you're more focused. You're more about, does this passage get where the author wants it to get, and not should this passage be going where the author wants it to go. That's generally a question for yourself and your writing only. So there are fewer questions, and once the social awkwardness is out of the way, editing is easier for me.
I find editing very satisfying in a way, because you can maintain your objectivity because it's somebody else's work. I'm very selective in who I edit for. Usually it's somebody I know, but also I know is going to be a little criticism as just that. It's a criticism to make their product better. I have a couple of friends that I edit for, and I will continue editing for them until they decide that they want somebody else to edit for them, because they're very appreciative. But there's been instances, like T said, you're editing and you think they understand what you're going to do and what it means for you to be editing, and what they're expecting is, oh my God, it's the greatest thing ever. It should be a bestseller on the New York Times. And that's not what you're giving them. Is you're giving them criticism because they've got a dangling participle somewhere, and they've got, this just doesn't make sense, or the eye color of this character changed midway through the story, and that's not what they want to hear. But it's like I said, editing can be very satisfying in an unobjective way, in that you're working on it, you're focused on it, and when you're done, there's a certain satisfaction because you're done. Whereas when you're writing, it can be fun. I really enjoy writing, but I never feel like I'm done. I have to force myself to say I'm done, hand it off to somebody else to edit. You always have to kind of have somebody else edit. And then even when it comes back, you're not done. And even when you're typesetting it and you're getting it ready to actually go to the printer, there's this little part of you that says, but I'm not done. But you have to, there's a point where as a creative, you say, you're done. Where with, as an editor, it's you're contributing to somebody else's work and you're helping them. And there's a satisfaction there that there's not an uncertainty. I don't feel as uncertain when I'm editing somebody else's stuff as I do when I am creating my own, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And it helps that my day job is editing.
Oh, well,
So I do a
yeah.
lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah. One other thing I want to cover real quick. You do have to sort out with whoever you're editing what the level of editing is going to be, because there is basic copy editing where pretty much all you are is a slightly more sophisticated version of Grammarly, and then there's getting a little bit into the weeds and just saying, okay, this character on page 23 says that they hate snowflakes, but on page 46 they really seem to act like they love them, and there's no transition that would justify a shift in attitude there. What's going on? Did you just forget something? Too much of that becomes co-writing, and if you're doing that, then you should get paid for it. But too little of that, it just starts to feel mechanical, like you're only editing a word at a time. It's something you have to work out. I think I've got one relationship where I sort of sometimes verge on being a co-writer. I'll suggest a little extra dialogue. I'll refashion something a little bit that's not working, but that's only because we have a long-standing relationship and we understand we work best that way. Anyway, that's something you've got to hash out, and that's the distinction between writing and editing can get blurry at times.
And then my next question, are there any stigmas you found associated with like self-publishing, or anything that you've come across when done it?
Numerous stigmas and not so positive tropes involved with being in self-publishing. There's always this aura of the content being, what's the word, lesser, because it's not being put out by a big two publisher, or it doesn't have a style of art which is conducive to the in-house styles of a Marvel or DC, that it's a vanity project, that you're simply putting it out to placate your ego. There's, like I said, there are tons and tons of I guess negative tropes out there about being in the self-publishing gig, and I've heard quite a few of them.
To be fair, though, Dan, you yourself said that the problem with the self-publishing thing is that anybody can do it.
I never said there wasn't a grain of truth in there. I'm just saying it exists.
Yeah, yeah. It falls upon us to prove that we're different from Jerry with his GeoCities page down the street. And
That guy.
Yeah, and we'll find our own way. We'll find our own various ways to do that. But yeah, I think that although I think some of the stigma is just boils down to whether they've heard of you or not.
I think the stigma is starting to lessen a little bit. There are organizations now, for instance, my husband is on the phone. There are organizations, like I'm a member of the Independent Book Publishers Association, and they actually put out standards so that as a self or independent publisher, they have a handbook. So they tell you what goes on the title page, what goes on, what should be on your spine, what it means, what's the difference between a trade paperback and a market paperback, so that as a self or independent publisher, you now have a group of folks that you can go to and get information so that your product looks more like the product that big publishers put out, and so that you understand what they're doing. And through those organizations, you can find editors, you can find typesetters, books, formatters, you can find good people to do your covers. I know Fiverr's out there. I've never used Fiverr. I have friends who've used Fiverr, and you get what you pay for. I'm sorry. You can get, and you can pay a whole lot of money for artwork. But if the person that's got artwork for you doesn't understand that it's got to fit on a 6x9 cover, don't give me something that's square. You have to understand that. You have to understand some of the pitfalls or how to communicate with somebody as to what you need. And I think there's a support system in place now that wasn't there 10 or 15 years ago, which means that the product that self-published and small independent publishers are putting out now looks the same as what everybody else is putting out. And because they now have access and know how to find an editor and whatnot, the interior product is better as well. And in some ways, it's not as staid. It's not as same old as what some of the big publishers are putting out, because the big publishers are like, well, this is what we published and was successful before, and we want to do it again. Well, some people want something different. And so I think the stigma is very slowly fading, but it's taken a long time to get there.
So I was gonna just ask you guys if you would mind just talking briefly about stuff that you're working on now, or anything you want to promote, and then I was gonna open it up to the audience and see if anyone has any questions. Do you guys mind just promoting anything you got going on right now, or what are you doing right now?
Right now, I just finished out and put out most of my Kickstarter backers, and I have a book out now called Chicken USDA Rejected. It's about, I bring this sort of stuffed chicken to shows. He's my official mascot, and it's basically a tale of him after Comic-Con on a Saturday night, where he roams the streets of Baltimore with his friend Monsignor Larry, and bumps into a bunch of random obstacles, including the Baltimore Police Department, the Secret Service, a secret corporate death cult, and bad parodies of Trump, Putin, and Colonel Sanders.
The Grand Trinity. So.
That sounds great. I am rerunning the longest and certainly most taxing series that I've ever completed, Gilded Age, an epic tale of income inequality across two worlds. If you like World of Warcraft and Dungeons Dragons, but you wish that they were a little smarter and seasoned with some socioeconomic awareness, I'd say it's worth a try. That's Gilded Age, gildedage.net. The big project I'm working on right now is not it's not comics at all. I am trying to create the world's largest crossword, and you'll probably know by this time next year whether I've succeeded or not. It's pretty involved. I was working on clues like 20 minutes before this session started, and I should give a quick shout out to Giselle Lagasse, she's the editing job that I was talking about, where I'll contribute the occasional line of dialogue. And what she's doing right now is called Pixie Tricks Comics. It's about a pre-coronavirus comic shop, and all the sexual tension that throbs through its set of 20-something employees. It's pretty funny.
Right, I'm gonna show you this novel. Remember I mentioned, a square doesn't fit on a 6x9. This is by Dreampunk Press. It's brand new. It is not mine. I edited, but I'm not the author. The author of this has dyslexia, and so does their main character, Iranian. It's fantasy. Came out in July. And again, this is, the whole, I mentioned sometimes people that are difficult to edit with. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's a series. And then the other thing I'm going to push is Rogues and Rebels. Dreampunk Press usually does an anthology in conjunction with MarsCon every year. There was no MarsCon this year. We didn't do an anthology this year because we knew far in advance. But last year we did this. Rogues and Rebels, it's an anthology. I do have a short story in here. And the cover actually drawn by the folks over at Conquest Comics. And then our, the Dreampunk Press graphics person actually did the coloring on that. And they're both available from Dreampunk Press. They're available with Open Dyslexic font, which is a font specifically developed for those with dyslexia. It's free to download from opendyslexic.org. I've got nothing to do with it other than I love that there's a font that they made specifically for that.
So I'm gonna unmute the audience. If anyone has any questions, now is the time. So. Sonia McGivney asks, how are comics different from graphic novels? Oh, Dan, you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah, I think we all got muted for a few minutes there.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, the comics are shorter is the quick and easy answer. The comics are generally considered to be those floppy things that are 22, 23 pages long that you'll see that you used to see back in the 7-Eleven racks when I was a wee thing, and now you see in specialty stores with different numbers on them every month. Whereas graphic novels, there's no set limit to the size, but most people think of them as at least 80 to 90 pages. Another big difference between them is that graphic novels are starting to make more money, like considerably more, to the point where I've heard some serious conversations about whether there will continue to be the small comics in 10 years.
Yeah, I don't do episodic comics for the most part anymore. I do either graphic novels or trade paperback, just because it's easier to sell a self-contained book than it is to try and to sell. A first issue is easy to sell. Second is a bit more difficult. But when you're say it's like a 4 or 6 or 12 issue series, trying to sell, it's law of diminishing returns tends to come in.
Yeah.
And another question we have from Laura is, what are some of the best ways for self-published authors to market their books?
Good question. Um, I basically having a good media presence, social media presence, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatnots. Basically, just putting yourself out there, pounding the pavement, going and doing conventions and shows are the ways that I'm usually putting my my stuff out there. Going on a fine show such as this one.
The first thing you have to know is what your story is, what your story is about. The you've got to have your and the second thing you have to know is why people would want to read it. You've got to have your elevator pitch in easy to rattle off. You know, I was a little more informal with my work earlier, but we had a quick and easy thing like science fiction fans in science fiction situations, or literal working class heroes in a fantasy world. And once you know that, then you start to determine what your marketing plan is, because you're starting to think about what kind of people you want to reach. Honestly, there are some venues that are great for reaching fans of all ages, but if what you're putting out is more PG-13 material, then you don't necessarily want to go to those, and you might want to focus on the teenage market, where getting something that's just a little bit subversive is still kind of a new thrill for them. The thing I'm trying to get across here is there's no one size fits all answer. You've got to figure out what your work is, and then figure out a marketing plan for it with the same kind of creativity that you're going to use to execute the work itself.
Yeah, social media is a good place to start. I put a couple of notes in the chat there for a couple of things that I wanted to make sure people picked up. I know I mentioned before I'm a member of the IBPA, and they have opportunities to market to. Dreampunk Press does a lot of YA. Our writers do a lot of YA.
Settle down.
A little bit harder sometime on Instagram and on Facebook, etc., to reach readers that aren't buying the books themselves. School visits are good. I haven't done any. I work Monday through Friday, which is kind of hard, but there are places like that. But for IBPA, it's expensive in order to get into some of these library. They have a teen and young adult, middle grade and young adult YA blast that they do. And they say that you have a discount as being a member, but you're still talking $300 to put one book in. NetGalley has ways of doing stuff, and again, it's expensive because you're competing with the big publishers. I mentioned over on the chat LitPick, which I found them on LinkedIn, and they've actually, one of our authors, Waiting for Normal, which is a contemporary teen novel, we got a review from them there. So we got a 5-star review. They give you a nice little sticker for that you could then put out, and they actually also promote your book. Now there's a cost for that, but it's like $25 to get it in there and started, which is actually so much more reasonable compared to some other things. And reviews are so important. And we've got one review. It's been there maybe a couple of weeks, and there will be more reviews. Because once you get reviews, you can start putting those reviews out there, and you can share those on your social media. So you got to have a plan, but you also got to go look around and see what's there. If you're looking at building a newsletter list, Book Cave, I think it's bookcave. I don't know if it's bookcave.com or bookcave.org. has opportunities where if you offer for free to help build your newsletter list so that you can start getting fans. Some of them allow novellas and some of them allow samples. So there are places out there that can help you, but it's going to cost. So you got to take a look, you got to make a budget, you got to have a plan, and then be consistent with it once you decide what you're going to do. But at the same time, if something's not working, don't keep doing it. If something is working, I mean, you can pay to put ads out on Facebook and Instagram, and Facebook does nothing. But I've gotten a little bit from some of the ads on Instagram. So.
Yeah, it's not that Google account, that Google AdWords account that you worked so hard on is not going to suddenly magically start putting back the effort that you put into it in the 4th or 5th week. I know this from experience.
Maddie asked, what does it take for you to be proud of your stories?
That's a very good question. My ego is all over the place, meaning that I can finish some little thing and laugh about it and feel great about myself for the next couple of hours, and then a few days later I can become convinced that nothing I have created is worth anything. Varying between those two extremes, the kind of pride that endures, I think, comes from having a goal with a little bit of social good behind it. You can't just you can't make it purely social good that motivates you, because then you just turn into a preacher, and nobody listens to a preacher except in church. But but you want to write a story that you feel has a good chance of making somebody's life better. That's all I got.
Again, these strange words. What is this pride thing you speak of? I guess how I know that, how I get pride for work, I guess I'm just doing the work. I mean, I guess for me, with being a writer and an artist, I guess I sort of have a visual record through the art of progress. It might be a little easier on mine to see my artistic side, to see progress, than maybe it is for somebody who's writing prose novels to see the progress over time. But I get either one. It's just again, like I said, noticing that you are, by putting in the work over a period of time, that you're seeing improvement upon said ability to do the work. I think that's where the pride comes from.
Not really being proud. The best feeling I've ever gotten was actually from a parent who I was at the Indie Author event a couple of years ago at the Norfolk Libraries. And the parent came up and they noticed that I have some steampunk novels and some YA novels, and they came over and they were just kind of chit-chatting. And they kind of said, so tell me about these. And they are my LGBTQIA plus positive novels. They're novels that were written because they didn't exist when my kid was going through middle school and early high school, grappling with their sexuality. And as I was going through, I mentioned in the third one, I says, and this has my ace baby in it. And the mother almost cried in front of me and bought the book, because that is how their child identified. And whether I sold another copy of that book ever in my life, not only did I make that woman's day, but I got a cute little message on the Facebook page, on my E.G. Gaddis Facebook page after, from the kid who read it and went, thank you. And that was all it was. It's like, thank you, I needed this. So, you know, there's pride in having completed something. And then there's this something that's even better when somebody reads a book and sees themselves represented there and gets something out of it and lets you know that. And I think that was, you know, some people, it's not just pride in whatever, but where you have contributed something that, you know, somebody else reads and goes, oh, I get it, you know, so.
Those are the moments. Yeah.
And another question I had from Evelyn, how long does it take to draft? Would you say it takes longer to draft a comic versus drafting a novel?
Well, again, I'm still imprinted on on comics in the days when we were talking about these 22-page things. But even if you're comparing on a page by page level, it generally takes less time to write a comics page, which could have 120 words of dialogue and some instructions to an artist that you trust, than it takes to write a page of a novel where you're carrying where your prose is carrying all the work yourself. Also, even graphic novels are generally a bit shorter than novels, word novels, you know, those pictureless things.
My experience is I don't have any experience putting a complete prose novel together. I'm actually getting ready to start my own prose novel, but I kind of work from what they call the Marvel method, but instead I play both the parts of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and that I compose what is known as a Bible of the basic events in the book, in the comic, and the characters, and then I put all the pages, I draw all the pages, and then I add the dialogue afterwards. It's sort of like looking at it. If I know my characters well enough, I can go, all right, here's panel 1, page 1, panel 1. This character needs to say this. This character needs to say this. This narration needs to say this. Okay, done. Move on to next panel. So again, it's being both the writer and the artist on a large amount of my projects. I kind of have a weird hybrid experience. My last book took me about 18 months to put together from start to finish. It was about 104 pages. If that gives you any clarity or perspective on it.
I'm sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button to unmute too. So the comic scripts that I've been working on aren't done, but I have completed novels. And there are novels that I completed after I started a comic project. So me personally, I would say a comic project can take longer, mainly because it is a different medium. It is a different way of communicating. And there is a way that it's kind of like the difference between writing a novel and writing flash fiction. I can't write flash fiction. I can write a novel, I can write a novella, I can write a long short story. Short stories, no. I cannot take what I want to say and get it into few enough words. So they're different mediums of communication that communicate a story in a different way.
Yeah.
Novels can take, if you're on and you know what you're writing and you don't have a whole lot of roadblocks in the way, you can write a novel in 6 months. You can have somebody edit it, you can get it and publish it in a year. Or like my next steampunk that's going to come out in January. I've been working on that thing for 3 years. Again, there was a point, there was a big hole in the middle of it that wasn't until like 6 months ago that the light bulb went off and went, I know what's wrong, so that I could fix it. So it depends so much on the project. But a novel you write by yourself.
Yeah.
A comic is a group team effort. And so while the writing of it might take a little bit, and again, like T said, you got to have, you know, an artist you trust, or like Dan says, you know, he does both, which again is a little different. If I were to try to write a comic and then illustrate it, it would never be done because I don't have. So they're two different mediums, and you have to recognize the differences. If you're used to one medium and you switch to another, it's going to take a long time because first you have to adapt to that new medium, that new communication pathway, and it's either way.
And Maddie asked, how much do you value outlining if you do it at all?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
How much do you value outlining your work?
Oh my God, so much, so much. And my co-writer on my last on Gilded Age would be rolling his eyes right now because at a certain point we diverged about how much outlining you should do. And if I'm to represent his point of view fairly, too much of it can bolt you down so that you're just kind of writing from point A to point B to point C to point Q. But I find it like writing a much shorter draft of the finished work, and and it helps me think through it helps me think through so many problems that before I would just kind of run into in page 50 of the giant novel about the Greek gods that I was writing, and then suddenly that project would be completely unworkable unless I wanted to start over. Outlining, especially when you're getting started as a creator, is an extremely valuable thing. And I basically, my default approach is to never write something that's longer than will take me one sitting. So the first time I sit down, I write the huge outline that covers everything. And I say huge, but I just mean that it's a couple of pages that with maybe a line like each for like 50 chapters. Then I'll sit down and figure out how that first chapter breaks down. And then once I get to that point, maybe I'm ready to start writing individual pages, which is something that you can do in a single sitting. Because if you try to write Jack Kerouac style and just get it all out on the page, one page after another, it'll be really exhilarating at first, but you'll be setting a death trap for yourself.
I guess the outline for me is pretty important. Like I said earlier, I start off by composing like a Bible for the comic book project that I'm working on, and I go from page work from there. But the outline basically gives me where I want to start, where I want to finish, and the basic composition of important characters in my book or whatever comic that I'm working on.
So I'm a pantser. Outlining, a true outline is not something that I do. I will write down major things that I know need to happen. The one time I tried to really do an actual outline, couldn't stick to it. My characters went way over here. So what works best for me is to know where I'm going, to know the major plot points of what has to happen to make it logical for them to get to the end. And then I will like summarize each chapter. And then I will basically expand each chapter. Yes, it's not quite pantsing, but it's not quite outlining either, but that's what works for me. But I don't write mysteries where I did write one, it has not been published, because you got to outline those things. You really have to make sure that everything makes sense, that all the clues add up to what you're telling people it adds up to. It was fun, but I don't know that I'll do that again. So I have kind of this hybrid, because I know how I write and my characters will go off. And so I outline in a way that allows them to do that without throwing me completely out of my story.
And had two more questions before we wrap up. The one from Laura was, has cancel culture affected your work in any way?
Maybe someone else take this one first. Yes and no. I think a lot about some about presenting some opinion that that just sets off the internet fireworks and bothers me for days. But I've already I already was kind of over that in a thanks to an early unpopular project I did, an attempt to chronicle the history of webcomics that you probably heard me talk about a time or two. I mean, I feel like I feel like it probably has influenced my decision to sort of hide in the relatively genteel world of crosswords for a little bit until I figure things out, because I don't really I don't mind the idea of being of becoming unpopular. So much as I mind the idea of becoming unpopular for the wrong reason. I want at least to feel like if I do end up taking a stand that's an unpopular one, I want that to be a stand that I 100% believe in. So I'm kind of mulling things over right now until I figure out what my stands are, and and while that's happening, I'm doing other creative work that's more low key and low drama.
So the Dreampunk Press Collective, I run the website, which means our newsletter that goes out, I write it. And when we take it, I talk to the other authors and I make sure we work together. So for the most part, we're pretty much occupy the same space. And so we're very careful about how we word our, when we take a stand on things. I also, there's, what gets put out by Dreampunk Press has to represent, and I recognize this, has to represent all of our authors. And so, again, I make sure that if we put anything out there, it's something that every one of us is willing to, to make a stand. On my personal pages, however, there are a couple of hills that I will die on, and I've let people know. Since, while there are things that I put out under my real name, Tara Moeller, which tend to be written and kind of encompass that hill, what I put out personally hasn't affected me because I think most of my readership there agree with me. Places where there might be a little bit of a difference, E.G. Gaddis is my big YA pen name. And I'm writing for kids there. There's not a whole lot of controversy other than the LGBTQI representation. And that's my audience. And, I take that. Most of the other authors that are part of the collective are behind me on that. We're also take stands on disability and disability representation. We now have a dyslexic author. And again, all of us back up that it's important, which is why we use open dyslexic font. So cancel culture impacts how we do things. But I think we promote something positive, that it's harder for, for Dream Punk Press to be hit negatively. Like I said, you don't even want to see some of the vitriol that comes across my personal stuff. I ignore it. So I would say that cancel, it's part of life now. I think we all know that. And I think we all recognize that we have to be careful. But like I said, even from Dream Punk Press, there's hills we'll die on. But yeah. Luckily we're taking that stand together. And so even if, I don't think there's anything that we're willing to die on that we don't have a whole bunch of people behind us backing us up. So I don't think that it will affect us. We're small. We have a small audience that supports us and that we support. So far, no.
You pick your shots. You decide what's important to you. I will say one thing that's kind of sort of in favor of cancel culture. When I got started, it was really popular for a while for comics creators on the internet to have hot takes about everything and to get into wild feuds over the most meaningless stuff. And I was not predisposed to such behavior, but I can't say that peer pressure didn't pull me along with it a little bit. There's a blog I wrote from 2004 to 2007 that no one will ever read again, and so while I think we're all concerned about anything that constitutes a threat to freedom to speak our minds, there can be good effects to a little gentle pressure to at least choose your words carefully enough that you won't regret them 3 days later.
Yeah, I think the old saying, any publicity is good publicity, no longer applies. And as long as you remember that now, yeah, and I think you got to pick your battles, even and either keep everything that's private, really private, vice your public, or just be willing to risk your public image with it. And most of the stuff that I've seen with cancel culture, it's big deals that does it. It's not, it's not the little nitpicky things. And even the folks, and even, big names, they're still weathering through. They're still weathering through. Little names have to be more careful with it because if enough of a snowball heads your way, you're going to be run over.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It is generally big things, so that's one reason I don't pump my fist too aggressively about cancel culture as a phenomenon in general, because I happen to I happen to feel that that certain people should be canceled and are probably overdue for a canceling. So I will. My response to it will be proportionate to to my feelings about it now and in the future.
No, it hasn't. In short, no, cancel culture hasn't affected me. I've come out as saying I don't believe. I don't. This is gonna sound messed up, but I don't believe cancel culture is a thing in the way that it is portrayed in the media. I tend to think of it as more of it's a new way of people dealing with the old adage of how do you separate the persons that enact in bad or terrible societal behavior from the works that they put out. And I will say, yes, there are online trolls, there are online bullies, there are those type of people, but is it a culture? I don't know. Like I said, I am always open to somebody coming up and telling me and explaining it in the way that changes my opinion. But that's my opinion of it. I don't think it's a way. I don't think it's a thing in the way that the media portrays it as being.
And last question we had was from Evelyn. It was, do you have any advice for aspiring authors?
I think I did mine earlier with the whole, if you can think of any other occupation that pays you well and gives you some sort of sense of pride and accomplishment of the work you do, go and do that. Otherwise, welcome
to that.
Yeah. Welcome to the world of in my field, welcome to the world of comics, and may God have mercy on your soul. That's my best piece of advice I can give you.
My advice would be to write. And just write, whether it's fan fiction, whether it's short stories, whether it's poetry, creative nonfiction, write. That's the way you get better. Find a venue to share it safely. And by that, I mean where you feel okay sharing it, where you feel that you're not going to be overly criticized, especially when you're first starting out. I know the Muse has workshops, they have reading nights for teens, etc. If your Conquest Comics has, if you want to do more comics, on Sundays they have workshops for kids. In all of their different locations, the Jersey Mike's, not Jersey Mike's, Jersey's Comics and Games locations. I know they're in Hayes. I think they're off Route 17. They've got one. John Milliday, he's the one that's helping me with the developmental edits on the comic I'm working on now. Don't be afraid. Everybody starts off making mistakes in their writing, and the way to get better, whether it's comics, whether it's drawing, whether it's writing novels or poetry, is just to keep writing and find somebody who will give you good criticism, feedback, that doesn't just tear your heart to pieces, but that is actually to help you make it better.
that is excellent advice, Tara. And my biggest add to it would be to say that if you want to be, if you're ready to get serious about this, if you're ready to say, I want to be an author, if Dan's advice had no impact on you at all, then
Just trying to be positive.
then you need to structure your life in a way that writing is just a natural part of it. The relationship, in other words, the relationship most people have with their phones, that's the kind of relationship you should have with writing. Where you literally start getting irritated if you put it down for too long. And that doesn't necessarily mean one project. You can work on something for a while and then do a little something else when you feel yourself maybe starting to hit a wall or need to take a step back. But I've had definite moments in my life where I can go back and think, if I had decided to spend more time doing X, then I probably wouldn't be a writer today. Life is full of distractions, and the 21st century has not gotten less distracting than the 20th. So you kind of need to rework your life until that's not going to be something that stops you.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us tonight as panelists, and thank you for everyone else who came out to listen. It was really great hearing from all of you and all the good questions you guys had. And I hope you guys have a good evening. IconiCon is still going on throughout the week. We have tomorrow night we're doing trivia at 7, and then Saturday we're having another live talk. That one is with one of the writers for the Civilization game. So definitely check those out. And thanks for coming again. And have a good evening. So.
Oh,
Hey, thanks.
Thanks to the other panelists. Good to see you.
Definitely check out Dan and T and Tara's websites. We have a lot of cool stuff up there. So.